All right, about time to get started this morning. Good to see everybody this morning. It's good to be back here this morning. Appreciate y'all allowing us a vacation last week. We enjoyed that, but we're very glad to be back here with our home congregation and back to our rhythm of Bible class and everything else. I did want to mention I appreciate Brother Ron teaching Bible class last week. I'm not nearly as smart or good looking as Brother Ron, but y'all have to deal with me today. And I heard y'all learned about this guy named Mr. Herman Newdick. I don't know who he is, but no, I'm sure he did a great job with what's that? Herman Newdick. Yeah, Net. There you go. Yeah, that's a good one there. Yeah, hermeneutics. We might talk about that again, or maybe not. I'll just leave that to Brother Ron. I'm talking about hermeneutics. I'm sure he did a good job there. But I'm sure that was good. Today, we're going to be conversation that Jesus had with Peter. He had more than one conversation with Peter, obviously. We're going to be focused on the one he had in Matthew 16. This conversation he had with Peter, and the central focus of this conversation being that about the church that Jesus would build. Will be the central focus of this. So open to Matthew 16, and we'll be there. We'll also be a lot of other places we'll go to if we have the time allows us to see some other things. But we're going to start here in verse 13 of Matthew chapter 16. Verse 13 introduces us to the thought here and the rest of the chapter and Jesus' conversation he has here with Peter, but also in front of the other apostles, teaching them about these things, and also some of this he's saying directed toward them as well, and certainly applicable for us today. So start with me here in verse 13 of Matthew 16. When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" So he introduces this thought here in verse 13. He's talking to his disciples, specifically the apostles here, his 12 apostles, and he asks, "Who do men say that I am?" He doesn't ask who. He starts out by asking, "Who does everybody else say that I am?" Now, there's a whole sermon you could get just from this one question here in this verse. Who do men say that I am? You know, we can apply that to today, can we not? How many people know about Jesus? At least just that Jesus was a man and did great things. Well, most of the world certainly knows about Jesus, regardless of what religion they're a part of. That's the kind of mark he left on the world. That's the kind of man that he was. Now think about this. Who do men say that I am? You think about what men, the world in general, thinks about Jesus. There are those who, not so many today, but used to, there were those who denied the existence of Jesus whatsoever. That's not very common now. There's too much evidence against that idea. But there are certainly plenty who deny the miracles that Jesus worked. But I don't think anybody denies the kind of man Jesus was. I don't think anyone denies how good of man Jesus was. We talked about before, you compare Jesus to these other so-called prophets, to Muhammad. Jesus wasn't a man like that. These other men who started these other religions outside of Christianity, they were well, maybe not always wicked men, the world might call wicked, but they were men. They weren't like Jesus. They were men who did sinful things, who weren't perfect. Jesus had absolutely, even up to the time of his death, there was nothing bad to say about Jesus. That the Romans didn't want to put Jesus to death. You remember what Pilate said? Pilate didn't want to put Jesus to death. The Roman official they brought him before, he didn't want to have anything to do with the Jews' accusations against Jesus, because he What did he say? I find no fault in this man. Well, many today, they don't believe in the miracles Jesus worked. They don't believe in who Jesus was, but can certainly agree about the kind of man that he was. Well, then you have the religious world very often does believe in who Jesus was and the things Jesus did and many of the things Jesus taught, but doesn't necessarily always believe Jesus. There's a difference in believing in Jesus and believing Jesus. Believing Jesus means we understand what he teaches and we obey what he teaches. We want to do what's right. We want to go to God's Word, the New Testament, which is what Jesus said, to find out what he has taught. So that's what he asked these disciples, these apostles here. Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? He refers to himself as the Son of Man. There's several ways he refers to himself here as the Son of Man. The Son of David is another way he refers to himself, and the Son of God. Well, all three describe who he was. The Son of Man, he is the God-man. He was God in flesh as a human being. Colossians 2:9, all the fullness of the Godhead dwelt in him bodily. The Son of David, well, he was the son of David. He was in the lineage of David. David was promised that this man we know, who is Jesus now, would come from his seed, from his lineage. And God providentially worked that out to be the case. And often the Jews would call him the son of David. David was a military leader. He was a great soldier, a great commander of armies, and he fought many battles and broadened the borders of Israel to a point where they never have been since, and eventually they lost all of that. But David, the son of David, in their minds meant the Messiah was going to be, Jesus was going to be this great military leader. He was going to come and lead the Jews in a revolt against Rome, and he was going to bring them out of Roman oppression and make them a world power again, like in the days of David and Solomon. He was the son of David, but not the way that they thought he was the son of David, and certainly he was the son of God. He is the son of God, the Christ, the Messiah. So whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Now, here's the apostles' answer. They tell him. And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist. One, some Elias, that's the King James Version here, renders it Elias, Elijah, that's the prophet Elijah. And others, Jeremiah, another prophet, John the Baptist is a prophet, or one of the prophets. So I found that very interesting here. That's what they said. This is what we get a glimpse into their world at that time and the way people were thinking about Jesus at this time. Jesus has at this point has been going all throughout. This is toward the end of his ministry before he goes to the cross. He's been going all throughout Judea, all throughout the Galilee, which is the northern part of Israel, the whole land of Palestine, we call over there now, among the Jews and the Gentiles that were there, and teaching things that people had never heard taught, and performing miracles. So people knew who Jesus was. They were seeing who Jesus was here in this area. I'm sure word spreading to other places as well. And this is their idea of who he was. John the Baptist. Who was John the Baptist? So he was the forerunner of Jesus. At this point has already been executed. He was a prophet. He was the greatest prophet. Why? Because he was the forerunner of Jesus. He was the last one just before he introduced Jesus, so to speak. He got people's minds, or he helped people's minds to be ready for Jesus to come and for this new covenant to come, this New Testament to come. That was John the Baptist. What was John the Baptist? How is he described in the beginning of Matthew and in Mark? Well, we might say a wild man. He was girded about with a leather girdle, wearing camel's hair, and his meat, what he ate mainly, was locusts and wild honey. He was a man of the wilderness. It doesn't seem he had much of a home. He was a traveling preacher. He lived out in in the wildernesses of Judea, and they're in the south part of Israel. And he ate what he could find, which was bugs and wild honey. That doesn't mean that's all he ate. He probably had other things as well, but that was his main supplement for his diet. He was girded about with that leather girdle. You know who else is described in a similar way? Not in that great detail, but at least the girdle about with a leather girdle. With a leather girdle. Back up to 2 Kings chapter 1, the king there, I forget his name now, but he sends messengers to go inquire of the false god, and they meet Elijah on the way. And they don't know who he is, but they go back and tell the king what Elijah said, which is a rebuke to the king. And the king, he says, well, what manner of man was this? What did he look like? Describe him to me. And they said, well, he was a hairy man, girded about with a leather girdle. It seems that leather girdle, for some reason, has something to do with these wild men, these men who are out in the wilderness. It has to do with their attire. It's a little different than everybody else's. And we also read about Jesus. He's speaking to John the Baptist when John is in prison and people are doubting him. He says, who did you come in the wilderness to see? Did you come out in the wilderness to see a man dressed in costly attire? That wasn't the word he used, but bright attire and costly clothes, and soft raiment is the word that Jesus uses. And soft raiment? No, and then he shows the contrast. John wasn't like these Jewish teachers, this hierarchy, these Pharisees. He was like the prophets, Elijah. That's how he was described, this hairy man, this man of the wilderness. Jeremiah, maybe not quite as much as Elijah and John the Baptist, but he was the same way. You read about the things, if you read Jeremiah, read about what happened to Jeremiah the prophet, what the religious leaders did to him, throwing him in pits and threw him in what was possibly when we read about it, we don't know this for sure, but it seems to be indicating maybe even the sewer where all their waste went, and kept him in there as a prisoner. And he dealt with those things and dealt with all kinds of harsh persecutions. These men who were prophets would put the manliest man in here to shame. These were men. These were absolute strong men. And John the Baptist, that's what he was. And that's what they're comparing Jesus to. Something else. These men were men who weren't afraid to speak the truth. These were not shy. Well, I say shy. That's wrong, being shy. These were not men who were shy about the truth. These were not men who were cowardice, who would bend to the will of other men, who were afraid of confrontation. No, these were men that didn't care if they were going to be persecuted or not, or that people were going to come against them or not. They didn't care if they were talking to the prophets, didn't care if they were preaching to the king and rebuking him, or if they were preaching to the common farmers and rebuking them and the people. They did it. They preached the word of God regardless of what people said and regardless of what kind of adversary they might come up against. Well, that's who they compared Jesus to. These people who didn't know who Jesus was. But they could see this about him, that he's like one of the prophets. He's like John the Baptist. Now, I say all that to give us this idea, and we get a glimpse into this, how people saw Jesus, how they viewed Jesus. This is maybe a pet peeve of mine. Maybe it's a pet peeve of some of yours as well. I'll bring it up. But look at the pictures that you can buy of Jesus, and look at how many of the movies and shows, and some of them have done a better job lately of depicting Jesus, I believe, than others. But look at the way the world often depicts Jesus. I'll just tell you this. I don't do any social media, but I do look at YouTube, and I ran across a video the other day, and it was this AI compiled picture image video of supposed to be Jesus, and he's supposed to be giving you all these encouraging words, and he was as smooth as a baby. His hair was cut perfect. His beard was just trimmed just to a T, and he was whiter than me, and he just pointed nose, and I thought I almost looked like a girl. I thought,
I think his coloring was wrong for a Jew.
His coloring was wrong. That's why I say it's whiter than me. His coloring was certainly wrong.
How many carpenters from back then do you think it would look like?
No, they wouldn't have looked like that.
They were out in the sun every day working with their hands.
And that's a whole other point. Before he was a preacher on the road, he's a carpenter. When we see him here, he's been working with his hands all his life. He's not been like the Pharisees or someone who's been in pampered and in the temple all the time. No, he's been out working. He knew what that was like. He lived as a common.
Scripture that says that the Son of God has nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, I don't know exactly the passage.
And anybody that doesn't have anywhere to lay their head, they're living rough.
Yeah, their beards aren't trimmed, probably.
No.
They're living rough. And that's what he said. I don't remember the exact passage there, but he said, foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head. He did. He slept in the ship. We read about him sleeping. He slept in a bed every so often, it seems. He would go to, when people allowed him in their homes, but he didn't have a home of his own ever since he started preaching. He would. But my point is, the way the world depicts Jesus often is very distorted. When we think about Jesus, we're thinking about someone who was a man who was a preacher, a evangelist, a prophet, who was on the road, who was his hands were calloused, his beard probably wasn't trimmed. He was a man that looked like John the Baptist, looked like these prophets. He stood out maybe even among other men. Well, maybe not stood out in the way he looked, but as far as being a traveling preacher, he might have stood out in a certain way. So that's just a pet peeve of mine when I see those things, people depicting Jesus in such a horribly wrong way. But here we see what they saw when they saw Jesus. They saw one of the prophets. Although he was a prophet, he wasn't. They didn't have the exact right idea about Jesus. They were on to something there, because Jesus is a prophet. He's the last prophet, actually. Hebrews tells us he's the greatest prophet, but he's a lot more than a prophet. He's a prophet in the sense that he came and he preached and he spoke the truth. But he's more than a prophet. He's the Son of God. He is the only one who could save us from our sins. Well, most people didn't understand that, it seems, or many people did not, at least. They could see there was something significant about him, but they didn't know exactly who he was at this time. We're going to find out here that Peter, and it seems to me he's speaking for the other apostles as well, because Jesus is speaking to all of them. I would think they all had this idea. Maybe Peter had more of a conviction about it than the rest. We also see Peter's often the one that speaks out. He's the spokesman for them often in situations. He seems to have maybe some energy that the rest of them didn't. We see that in different situations. If you ever worked somewhere and worked in a group, you're going to have one person that probably, just takes the lead, just speaks out for everybody else. Maybe not in a wrong way, but just some people naturally lead, naturally speak out. Peter seems to be that person in this group with the apostles, and often it got him in trouble. In fact, at the end of this passage, it's going to get him in a little bit of trouble, him speaking his mind the way that he did. So here, verse 15, so he asked what the world says about him, and they know what everybody else is saying. He's showing a contrast here. Now he's going to show a contrast. This is what the world says about me. It's some true, but it's not everything. Now here's the contrast. He saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Who do you say that I am? So he makes it personal. Who do you, the apostles, the ones that have been following him, closest to him, say that he is? And here's the answer from Peter. Verse 16, and Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. These are the very greatest words that Jesus ever spoke. This is the very greatest words that Peter ever spoke. He would never say anything greater than this. He never did before say anything greater than this, and Jesus makes that very clear here. These words, this confession, about Jesus, we're about to find out, becomes the foundation for what Jesus came to do, for the church, the kingdom that Jesus came to establish. That's what these words become here. The Son of the living God. Let's stay there in verse 16 for a moment, though, and focus on these great words that Peter spoke. We're going to find out in verse 17. These words are from God. This is something that is absolutely true from God. So, but what do you say? Thou art the Christ. He's the Messiah. He knows who he is. He knows he's the one who is to come and redeem the world from sin and bring about this kingdom, the church. The Son of the living God. What a powerful phrase that is. I want to emphasize that. What a powerful phrase that is. When I read this, it takes my mind right back, and we're going to go there, back to 1 Samuel chapter 17. Go with me there to 1 Samuel chapter 17. And we're going to look at, this is David, in the Old Testament, David, 1 Samuel chapter 17. And David, before he became king, this is the start of David's works, the start of all the things that David did. He was a shepherd boy, the youngest of his brothers, and his brothers. What happened here in chapter 17? They're off fighting this, supposed to be fighting this battle against the Philistine army. Saul and his army, which includes David's brothers, the Jews, the Israelite army, they're in this place. They're on one mountain, one hill. There's a valley between them, and there's the other hill on the other side where the Philistine camp is, the enemy. And they're supposed to be, or they're in battle, although they don't seem to be actually battling at the moment here in chapter 17. But what happened here, we remember Goliath, this giant. What did he do? He came out and he's mocking them. He's cursing them. The Israelite armies, that is, and making fun of them. And he's challenging them, and he tells them, challenges them for one man, instead of all the army coming and fighting, for one man to come and defeat him. He doesn't believe he can be defeated, it seems. He's very arrogant. He's a giant, about 9'9", that's how tall he is. And anyways, no one will take up on this challenge for fighting him, except one person. David's not even there. He's just keeping the sheep. But his father sends him to go check on his brothers and bring them some supplies, some food. So he goes, and he doesn't know what's going on until he gets there. It doesn't say, at least not the details about this Goliath guy who is defying the armies of Israel. But here's what happens. David shows up, and he sees this Goliath, this giant, this Philistine, maybe walking back and forth out here in this field. I'm not sure what it looked like exactly, but he is just defying the Israelites, his brethren, the armies of God, as he puts it. So read chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. Read verse 26 here with me. We read what David said here. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? So he's talking about Goliath, the one that challenged. And taketh away the reproach from Israel. They're all hiding. They're terrified. They don't have any faith. David sees this as a reproach. But listen to what he says, how he describes this situation. And take away the reproach from Israel. For who is this? And you can tell he's already thinking about him being the one to do this, right? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? He described, this uncircumcised was the main thing that separated at least physically, that separated the Jews from the rest of the world. The rest of the world didn't really circumcise. The Jews did. It was a mark to show that they were different. It started with Abraham and carried on all the way through Judaism. So but this is an insult to him. This uncircumcised, what right does he have? An uncircumcised Philistine, that he should, now listen to the last part, that he should defy the armies of the living God. Now, Jesus the Son, Christ the Son of the living God. There's a lot of power about that statement, the living God. That's how David described the Jewish army here, the Israelite army. Although they're cowardice and they're terrified, they don't have any faith, it seems, or not enough faith, they're still the armies of the living God. Notice how he describes them, the living God. To David, God wasn't just some distant being that didn't care about his creation, that is detached from people and society and his people specifically. No, the living God, the powerful God, the God is at work all the time, the God who is always our God, the living God. He's not a dead God. He's not a distant God. He's the living and powerful God. Now, there's one more statement he makes here. In verse 36, he goes to Saul and was requesting permission to go and fight this Goliath. And he said, thy servant, talking about himself, to Saul, slew both the lion and the bear and this uncircumcised Philistine. So he tells Saul, I've done this. I've killed the lion, I've killed the bear. God's with me through everything I do because of his faith in God. And he was. So he compares that lion and the bear to this uncircumcised Philistine. Notice again, this uncircumcised Philistine shows a contrast there. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. He said he's going to be just like that lion and that bear because of God giving me the strength, the power to do this. And him having the faith to do this, to take him down. But read the last part. Seeing, it's about this Philistine, this Goliath, he hath defied the armies of the living God. So to David, God was very personal. It doesn't seem these other men who were supposed to be in this battle took what Goliath was saying quite as seriously as David did. David, when he heard Goliath's defilement, when he heard Goliath's rebuke against and talking down to the armies of God, to David, that was a direct insult to the living God. And it didn't sit well with David. He said, well, somebody has to do something about this. The living God, that's who we serve today. And that's who Jesus is the Son of the living God. Now go back to Matthew 16 with me. Ended up getting a little bit off topic there, but we're there in verse 16 of Matthew 16. So that's Simon Peter's answer about who Jesus is. Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. He has a conviction about who he is and about who God is. Just like David had that conviction. Excuse me. So, that's his confession. Now, about who Christ is. Now, verse 17. And Jesus answered and said unto him, upon him saying this, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. So there's a contrast. His Father which is in heaven. Peter's speaking the truth. He's speaking what he's been shown from Jesus, which is from the Father. He's speaking the truth. Now verse 14 told us about what the world said, flesh and blood, other people, what they said about, or at least the world around them said about who Jesus was. But what Peter says is not influenced by what they say. What the world says about Jesus, the world's understanding about Jesus, didn't affect Peter's understanding about Jesus. It didn't affect Peter's conviction about who Jesus was. I believe there's a lesson there. And often when we look at the world, we're looking at a religious world that often doesn't appreciate or have a conviction about who Jesus is, what Jesus has taught. Well, what do we have to do as Christians? We have to go to the New Testament and find out all about Jesus, what Jesus wants, who Jesus is, what he requires of us. Peter didn't have the New Testament. He was part of the writing of the New Testament. but he had a conviction about who Jesus was. And that conviction is the foundation of what we're about to see here in just a moment. Now, verse 18, Matthew 16 and verse 18. And I say also unto thee, this is Jesus still speaking, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates, King James Version here says, of hell shall not prevail against it. We'll read verse 19. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now come back to verse 18 with me. Jesus tells him, thou art Peter. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this verse among many of our religious friends, certainly, about what's being said here. And I say our religious friends because they are, but the Catholic Church claims that Peter is or was, in a sense at least, the first pope. Or maybe not that he was necessarily the first pope, may have that a little bit off, but that the papacy came from him, that he's what started it. And this is where they go, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock, assuming that this rock is this man Peter. Now, first of all, I'd like to point out this is Jesus speaking. Does it make sense for Jesus to build this kingdom? Think what we read about the kingdom. Daniel 2:44. The contrast to Daniel 2:44. Daniel's interpreting the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had of the image and the head of gold and the chest and shoulders and arms of silver, and the belly and thighs of bronze, and the legs and feet of iron. And those parts of this image are representing different nations that would come. And Babylon, who was there then. Well, Daniel shows a strong contrast. He tells about all these nations that were going to come and eventually bring about the kingdom that is everlasting, is how Daniel describes it. Is this kingdom that God is going to set up is everlasting. It's forever. It is. It's not. Anyways, it goes right along with this verse. In fact, let's read that verse since I'm talking about it. I can't quote it perfectly. Daniel 2 and verse 44. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44. Read with me there. Daniel says, in Daniel 2 and verse 44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and shall stand forever. Well, what's Jesus describing here? He's describing something. He's calling it the church. He's describing something that he's bringing about that's never going to go away. It's not like the kingdoms of men. It's going to stand forever. How many kingdoms of men stand forever? None of them. No great nation. Our nation is not going to stand forever. I'd like for it to, because it's what we're a part of, but it won't. We've been here a long time. It won't stand forever. We're not an eternal nation. But the kingdom that God set up, that Jesus is speaking about here, will stand forever. Mark 9:1, Jesus tells, and at the end of this chapter as well, he says a similar thing. Mark 9:1, Jesus tells his apostles and those there standing in front of him that you will see the kingdom come. Many of you will see before you die. I'm paraphrasing the verse, but see the kingdom come. The kingdom, he's talking about the kingdom of God, the same kingdom that Daniel's speaking of. You'll see it come with power. Well, what kingdom is that he's talking about? Well, the church. I would contend that that's certainly, not just I would contend, it's absolutely the same kingdom, the same as what he's speaking of here, the church. And all those things are revealed throughout the New Testament. The church is the kingdom, absolutely the kingdom that was prophesied all throughout the Old Testament. It's the kingdom that Daniel told us about in Daniel 2 and verse 44. That's the church. That's this church that and now, how amazing. We read about that from Daniel. hundreds of years beforehand, and all these nations have come and gone. And here's the Roman Empire that Jesus was born into, and it's ready. It's time. Jesus is here. Paul said, we talked about some of this in Galatians class Wednesday night, but Paul said in Galatians 4, and one of the first few verses there, I believe verse 3 or 4, he spoke of the fullness of time when Jesus came. The fullness of time. What does that mean? Well, he came right whenever God planned on him coming. That's when he came. He came right on time. We talked about this as well Wednesday night, but why didn't Jesus come to earth right after Adam and Eve sinned in Genesis chapter 3? It wasn't the fullness of time. We don't know what all goes into that. We're not God. We don't have his wisdom. But we do know from his word that there was a time that he was waiting for. And God sent Jesus at just the right time. And here's Jesus here, what we're reading about, telling his apostles, it's time. Almost time. And what did Jesus preach? And John the Baptist preached, the kingdom of heaven is what? It's at hand. What does that mean? Well, it's right there. It's not something we're waiting on today to come. This is right there. It's at hand. Just like something is right there at your hand. That's what that's indicating. It's right there. It's coming. Well, here it is. It's almost here. And Jesus is preparing the apostles for it and teaching them more about it. So upon this rock, anyways, I got away from what I said about Peter, I guess. Well, no, I was making a point there about I did get away from it. But he makes a contrast, Daniel does, in the kingdoms of men, in the kingdoms of men, and this kingdom that he's going to bring, that God's going to set up. In the days of the Roman Empire, we know is what that was now. That's when the kingdom was set up. Well, the days of these kings. Well, this isn't the kingdom of men. This isn't something that's going to be built on someone like Peter. Other than that, the wording here, he's referring to the statement that Peter said there in verse 16. That's the rock. That's the foundation. Because who is the foundation of the church? Jesus Christ. So this statement that Peter made, that's what Jesus is referring to here. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock. Not Peter. Not upon. He didn't say, upon thee, Peter, going to build my church. And no, he didn't say that. Upon this rock, something far greater than Peter. The statement that Peter made about who Jesus is. Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus is King. He is the King. He is our great shepherd, our great King. He's the purchaser, the founder, the purchaser, the proprietor. Let's say the word. He runs the church. He tells us what to do. He tells us how to do it. He's the one that adds to the church. There in Acts 2, in verse 47, he was adding to the church daily, such as should be saved. Now, Jesus is the one that adds to the church. He's the one that runs it. He's the one that makes the rules. He's the one that founded it. Acts 20 and verse 28, Paul speaking to the elders, I believe that was at Ephesus there, and he tells them to shepherd, about how to shepherd the flock, to feed the flock, rather is what he says, over the which you are overseers. Shepherds, the elders, the overseers, feed the flock, take care of the flock, shepherd the flock. That's what feeding indicates, being a shepherd. Over the which you are overseers. Well, then he further emphasizes, Paul does there in Acts 20 and verse 28, the church, I lost I had it in my head. Might have to go there. Anyways, the church purchased by Jesus Christ. Let's go there because I lost it. Let's read that real quick. Acts chapter 20 and verse 28. We don't want to mess that one up. So we don't want to mess any of them up, but we're not going to mess that one up. So there Paul says in Acts 20 and verse 28, speaking to the elders at Ephesus, take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed, there we go, yeah, it's connected to the feed, to feed, who? The church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. Jesus purchased the church. God purchased the church with his own blood by coming and living as a man on this earth. John 1 verse 14, he came and dwelt among men. He came and he literally dwelt among men. He had to, in order to be able to make that physical sacrifice, that perfect, shed that perfect blood, that sinless blood, for who? His church, which is anyone. It's for the whole world. Anyone who's willing to obey the gospel, is willing to be Christians, do what's necessary to be Christians, and have their sins washed away, be part of that church. So, upon this rock, that statement, back to Matthew 16, verse 18. Upon this rock, that statement about who Jesus is, he says, I will build my church, and the gates of heaven. Now, I want to mention that. I guess that'll be the last thing I mention. There in verse 18, the gates of heaven. My King James Version says hell. I don't think that the King James rendering of this word helps us understand what Jesus is saying here very well. Because we think of hell as being the place of torment. What Jesus described as Gehenna very often, that place where hell, heaven and hell, the contrast there. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's not speaking of hell as in the place of torment, those cast into hell. The New King James Version, probably a lot of you, the versions reading are not saying hell, but the New King James Version says Hades. The American Standard says Hades.
ESV says Hades.
Hades. I think they're about all of them, except the King James say Hades, and which is a better, at least for us, our ears, understanding what that's saying. Hades, the Hadean realm. I remember when before we went to preaching school, we were members here. The Brother Gene Maxwell, he preached a sermon about the different realms. You have the Hadean realm, the spiritual world where we go when we die, and there's paradise where Jesus said that the thief on the cross was going to meet him in paradise. It seems to be a different place than heaven. Heaven seems to be the place at the very end of eternity. Then you have torment. Then you have Gehenna, hell. Anyways, that's a whole other lesson. But what he's speaking of here is not necessarily hell, or not hell as in the place of torment, but the Hades, meaning the Hadean realm, meaning where we go when we die. All of us go into Hades when we die, whether we're Christians or lost. Everyone goes to Hades, meaning that's the place we go when we die, whether we go to torment or we go to paradise. All that is referred to as Hades. So he's speaking of death is not going to prevail against this. Now, certainly, we know from throughout the whole scriptures that the church is going to last forever. We just read that. Daniel 2:44. The kingdom, that's the church, is going to last forever. So we know that. But as far as using this verse to say that hell will not prevail against it, I don't know that indicates that. That's indicating this here, I believe, is referring to what happened to Jesus on the cross. Well, he died, but he didn't stay dead. He went into the Hadean realm. He died. He died a physical death, but that didn't stop the church. You know, this would be a little deeper. I'm not ready to talk about, but think about Satan when he saw Jesus die on the cross. He bruised his head. That was that prophecy back in Genesis 3. He bruised his heel. He bruised Jesus' heel by having him crucified on the cross. But Jesus came back from the dead, resurrected, and fulfilled that prophecy in Genesis 3 that he was going to crush Satan's, that serpent's head. When he rose again, he did. Death didn't keep him down. Death didn't keep the church from being established. Didn't keep this promise that Jesus is making. Jesus' death on the cross did not keep prevailing against the church coming. Because we read about next too, the church came. A lot more to say, but no time to say it. So appreciate y'all's attention this morning.